Hi, grown-ups. Thanks for joining. Happy Monday. We're going to learn about the Journey Junior podcast. It's out now. You can find the link in today's episode description so you can listen with your kid and talk to them about the Bible.
Now, if we're honest, reading the Bible consistently can be a challenge. But know that it's never too late to start, and we're in this together. Thanks for journeying with us. And here's your host, Emma Daughter.
Thanks for joining. Today, we are reading Psalms 79 through 85, and I am actually back in the podcast studio with one of our Watermark worship team volunteers, Shelby Carnifex.
Hey, guys.
You were here for Psalm 1, and we thought, we got a hole. We need to find a worship team guest. What if we just called Shelby back? And
glad to be here.
You answered the call. But since we just recently got to hear your story, we'll link that episode in the description. And I want us to just jump in because we're kicking off Psalm 79 with actually a lament song.
This is true. When I was first asked to cover this section, specifically the question, does God deprive his people of anything good? I was like, oh, do I want to talk about that?
Yeah,
it feels a little scary.
It's a big one.
Yeah, but I'm really thankful for the opportunity to just sit in this. And I was really encouraged in reading all of these chapters. I felt like, wow, how timely and sweet that it would begin with a lament psalm in Psalm 79. And so I'd love to just read a little bit of where we're going, Psalm 84, and then jump back into the beginning at 79. So let's start with Psalm 84, verse 10. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless. I found this quote that says, we sometimes read this as though there was something heroic about the choice, some tough sacrifice in this decision, but there's nothing of the kind. This singer was a man of profound common sense. And I love that. Let's jump in to Psalm 79.
Okay, take us back.
Today's reading is a lament psalm, 79. That just means that this psalm is broken up into a few different movements, and so we'll kind of walk through those. Sometimes it is very easy to feel this longing for the Lord, this desire to worship him like we see in Psalm 84, and sometimes it takes a lament to get there. So first, the author, Asaph, he opens with addressing and turning toward God, and that part is super important. Scholars believe that this psalm was written shortly after the complete destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. And so this is a crying out to the Lord after just a deep, painful, and widespread loss. In verses 1 through 4, he's like, God, look around. Don't you see that your people have just been completely destroyed? And he's kind of laying this all out before the Lord. The way that the psalmists write out their burdens like this is just so inspiring to me and just reminds me that our pain is not belittled or minimized in the light of God's grace and his goodness, but that he hears us and he sees us in it, and these two can exist at the same time. It's so important to sit and complain like we see here, but we notice and remember that this complaining is not happening outside of the presence of God. It's the very first thing he does is address God and invite him into it. In the next movement of Psalm 79, Asaph pleads with God for him to move and to change the circumstances. I actually love the question that we've heard before in the Psalms, how long, O Lord? I love it because it's just a real and humble question, because it's like, God, is it 2 days? Is it 2 years? Will this pain last forever? We've all experienced a how long, O Lord, circumstance in our lives that can feel like God is withholding from us. I love how in verse 11, he just pleads, let the groaning of the prisoner come before you. According to the greatness of your power, preserve those who are appointed to die. This is just a faith-filled petition to the Lord that he's asking, not only, God, would you rescue us, but would you just hear the groaning and the complaining of your people in your kindness? And lastly, the author of this psalm turns back to the Lord in this last movement again, and he says, "We will praise you forever, from generation to generation. We will proclaim your praise." And so after praying for rescue and protection and even vengeance, he ends this psalm with just grateful dependence on the Lord. And he recognized God's place in his life just as shepherd over his people, which is really encouraging.
Super sweet.
Even after this destruction, Asaph can come back to the truth that the Lord is our good shepherd and just deserves all the glory and the praise. Even if the answer to our how long isn't as short as we would like it to be, Asaph just models this turning toward and worshiping for what God has done and who he is. And then to kind of wrap up this section, Psalm 84 addresses this question of, does God deprive us of anything good head on? We know that in God's presence, we lack absolutely nothing. I love in verse 7 where it says, they, those whose strength is in God, go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. And this is just such a sweet picture of how God sustains us and he just carries us day to day. I love this idea in verse 3 where the psalmist says that even the sparrow has a home in the tabernacle. And I read this commentary that I just thought was so cute and sweet, that they said perhaps the psalmist saw birds, the sparrow and the swallow, that had made a nest living at the house of God in view of the altar itself.
That's fun to think about.
Isn't that so cute? And so it said he considered those birds blessed living at the tabernacle, that the writer of this psalm probably had a peculiar, just familiarity with the tabernacle and got to witness these birds living out this truth that God will provide and that they have a place and a home in his presence. It says he had watched it with loving eyes and seen the birds finding rest and refuge there, which I thought was really sweet.
That is sweet.
And then in verse 11, no good thing will he withhold is a promise that is made to those who walk uprightly. They will receive every good thing that God has for them. And the nature of this promise makes sense under the old covenant where God promised direct blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience. But today, under the new covenant, we know that the believer receives God's good things on the basis of Jesus' goodness, and then in response gets to go on and walk uprightly. And then lastly, I just wanted to close with this quote that I thought was so sweet and just kind of sums up this whole little chapter by the one and only Spurgeon. It says, "To bear burdens and open doors for the Lord is more honor than to reign among the wicked. Every man has his choice, and this is ours. God's worst is better than the devil's best."
God's worst is better than the devil's best. It's so interesting to think about. It's a creative way to write about God. But I get the sentiment. It's like God is so infinitely grand that whatever could possibly be the smallest aspect of his character is significantly larger than Satan's best effort.
Yeah.
Not just larger, more victorious, more complete, perfect, triumphing.
And that what we think is, we would think the blessing and the good things would be to reign among the people and mankind. And yet, the psalmist is no, it's actually to be a servant, but in the house and the presence of the Lord is the good gift that the Lord provides.
Shelby, if you were to give listeners a reflection question, what would you encourage them to chew on?
A couple things that stood out to me. One was, where are the good things that God is providing for me that I may not be delighting in or that I may not be seeing? So that was one thing for myself that I thought. And then two, personally, I think sitting in the lament and crying out to God has helped me to feel like, oh, he's with me in this. And so that has filled me up and allowed me to feel his presence and his peace. And so I would say, secondly, what do I need to bring before the Lord so that I can experience the fullness of joy that I know is in his presence?
Where are the good things that God is providing for me that I may not be seeing? And what do I need to bring before the Lord so that I can experience his goodness or the fullness of his joy.
Mm-hmm.
It's good, Shelby. Our response song for today's episode is Psalm 84, Better Is One Day. So we will link that in the episode description. Shelby, thanks for jumping back on with us. And as always, I'm so glad we're all on this journey reading the Bible together.
Hey, we want to thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Did you know that you can help support Join the Journey by rating and reviewing this podcast? And if you're willing, we'd love it if you subscribe, because the more you download, the easier it will be for new friends to find the podcast.